Welcome, I'm Sam Faddis. This is N Magazine's Ground Truth, and we're going to be talking about Afghanistan today and the peace deal that may or may not be forthcoming, whether it's a good idea, where we really should be going in Afghanistan, and maybe take a little bit of time to delve into the complexities behind this whole situation. With us, I'm very pleased to have Ahmad Mumtaz Khan, who is the chief of the Ali Khel Zazai tribe. I apologize for my pronunciation, which is a Pashtun tribe, a large group of folks who live both in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that is to say, on both sides of what is known as the Durand Line. Mr. Mumtaz, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be with you.
Well, I thank you for making the time. As I said to you off air before we got started, despite the fact that the United States has been involved in Afghanistan in one way or the other for decades, there are a lot of issues here that I think are still very poorly illuminated for the average American. So let's start with this. Can you explain to us when we say that you're the chief of this tribe, what is this tribe? What's its size? Where is it located? That kind of background.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation. Let me say hi to everyone, your listeners, and thank you very much. And I'm very impressed with your background. And coming back to your question, the Zazai tribe is a very large Pashtun tribe, which are on both sides of the Durand line in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. And it consists of almost close to 300,000 people. And mostly on the Afghan side, we are in southeast Afghanistan, which we call it Loya Paktia, which is Paktika host provinces, and we are living in two major districts in Paktia and one district in host. In Paktia is Aryot Zazai districts and Zazai Ahmad Khel district, and in host is Zazai Maidan district. And then across the Durand line in Pakistan side, we are living in Kurum Agency, which is a tribal belt, and also Wurgza Agency and some part of North Waziristan, which is Mir Ali and Miram Shah. So we are mostly a Pashtun tribe and live on both sides of the border and been there. And since it's a very sensitive area, some people call it a tribal belt, which is free land. It used to be not under any government, either Pakistan or Afghanistan, and we have our own tribal force, which we call it Arbakai. And Zazai tribe has almost about 12 to 15,000 tribal force, which is paid by the tribe, and it is protecting the tribe, and all the land belongs to Zazai tribe. This is the brief description. If you have more questions, I'll glad to answer those.
Sure. Well, let me just follow up on one key element of this, and then I do want to jump into talking about this peace deal, so-called, that may or may not be forthcoming. But back to this issue of the Durand Line. If you look on a map, frankly, this is true all over the world. Any place where the British or the French or other Europeans were, there are a lot of lines drawn on maps that were drawn by by some Englishmen, or in some places some Frenchmen, and this is one of them. In other words, this border that runs between Pakistan and Afghanistan on any map that you look at is a line that was created, I think, by the British. And while it divides these two countries, It really runs right through the middle of the area inhabited by the Pashtun people. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. Very correct. Yes, yes. It is right going through the middle, and that's why same tribe lives on both sides. And the funny thing about is, in my tribe, or even on my own family, my house. I mean, there are big, huge houses in this area built by Pashtun because typically Pashtun traditions we are a joint family system living under one roof. So it is like the whole family, like the whole clan live in one house. So like 200 people live in the same household. So imagine how big the house should be. So in case of mine, I mean, my house is built right on the Duran line. I mean, my house, which we live in, it's on the Afghan side, and our guest house is on the Pakistani side. But it is all over the same place. It is right on the border. So I mean, and then the people in my village, when they get up in the morning and have their breakfast, they have lunch on the other side in the Parachinar or Miramshah, and then they come back for dinner on the Afghan side. So this is usual day-to-day business.
Right. So I mean, amongst all of the other myriad issues that are here, what we have is a system, if you will, where we broke this place up. We, the British, broke this place up really into nation states, not paying a lot of attention at all to the reality of who was actually living on the ground.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it is not just our tribe. It is almost, I'll say, around 40 to 50 tribes across this Duran line, all Pashtun tribes from eastern Afghanistan going all the way to the western Afghanistan, from starting from border Chatral on the Pakistani side, in Kunar on the Afghan side, going all the way to Kandahar, Skin Boldak, and Chaman and Quetta side. So this is the whole almost about 14 or 1500 kilometer of border, and all these tribes are divided into by this line.
So let's jump into this so-called peace deal, which is there's been there have been announcements. There's been word recently that there may in fact be some sort of peace agreement to be announced between, well, I mean, it's described as between the Taliban and the United States government, but to try to bring the conflict in its current form anyway to an end. And I know you've made some pretty substantive comments about what you've heard. What are your thoughts?
Yes, as a tribal chief and part of the culture, I'm on the day-to-day, weekly basis contact with my tribal sources, tribal people inside Afghanistan on both sides of Duran line. Even I have my own contacts and sources on the Taliban office in Doha in Qatar, and also in Peshawar, Quetta, Kabul, Paktia, and different places. So based on my sources and my information, I think something is going on between Taliban and the United States. I mean, they've been working on this for the past 18 months. The U.S. side led by Ambassador Khalilzad, and the Taliban side led by Mullah Baradar. And also, they've been working very hard to achieve something. I think they reached some point now to sign a deal, probably sooner, in a week or 10 days. That's what my sources tell me. And the major point is that they will be in a week time of just testing that how the Taliban can reduce the violence. And then based on recent contact with one of my sources in Doha, Qatar, they told me that the U.S. want the Taliban to reduce, like, for example, if there are 75 attacks during 24 hours all over Afghanistan, these should be reduced to 15 attacks. And same thing, like more like these. I mean, no major attacks on the major cities, on the major highways, on the major use bases, and a major Afghan National Army headquarters. So these are the some points which are among the agreement which both sides agreed to follow. And then if this 1 week passes, test passes okay, then both sides will sign the deal. But the point which is not discussed there is that the Taliban will, after this, get into negotiation or talks with Afghan governments. So that point is totally not in the agreement. And then on the other side, Afghan government is very upset with this. And I think Ambassador Khalilzad was in Kabul for the past 2 days, meeting President Ghani, Dr. Abdullah. And then there's another chaos coming up based on my information. Both sides are on the Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani and President and Dr. Abdullah are announcing that both are presidents based on the election announcement. And then this creates another confusion in the international community. I mean, so far, the US, the Russia, Great Britain, Pakistan, Iran did not congratulate President Ghani on his winning. And then, so this makes the international community very confused at what's going on. And Ambassador Khalilzad, I think, met with both sides and even traveled to the north, meet with General Dostum, because General Dostum announced yesterday a parallel government in the north of Afghanistan. And then based on my information, the followers of Dr. Abdullah and Dostum and all their coalition, they are taking off all the picture of President Ghani down from the main government buildings and putting Dr. Abdullah and Dostum's pictures there as a president of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. And then again, based on my information from my tribal sources in the south of Afghanistan, President Ghani's followers are taking off all the pictures of Dr. Abdullah out of the government buildings and leaving President Ghani's pictures there. So this creates a chaos and also a division between Afghans, which is not good for the peace plan in Doha, and that will be definitely affecting it. And but we'll see. The main thing is there's a lot of chaos and confusion in both sides on the inside Afghanistan and the north and south. Based on my information, there's a lot of small arms like AK-47 and different kind of arms are distributed among their followers, which is not a good sign.
So are you encouraged, or do you think this is an illusion and worse days are yet to come?
I think the worst days have to come because I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what I'm reading it from my perspective and my point of view and based on my information from my sources inside and outside Afghanistan, I think it's a kind of civil war coming up.
So, once I have a variety of questions. Let me start with this one to follow up. Once upon a time, the United States signed a peace agreement with North Vietnam to end the Vietnam War. And if you read the peace agreement as it was written, it was a pretty reasonable document. I mean, it essentially, the North Vietnamese agreed on paper to stay out of South Vietnam, et cetera, so forth. In other words, on paper, we were leaving behind a stable situation, independent South Vietnam, et cetera. Obviously, the problem, which proved to be fatal, was that once the North Vietnamese agreed to this, there was no mechanism to make them follow, to make them keep their word. So as fast as as fast as the ink was dry in the agreement and the Americans left, the North Vietnamese did whatever they wanted to do, and they overran South Vietnam. And the agreement, in other words, wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just as a foundational question, because I have a variety of others,
Mm-hmm.
how if an agreement means at some point American forces, which are already drawn down a lot, begin
Mm-hmm.
to leave, what stops the Taliban from then doing whatever they want after we're gone?
I think, based on my information and knowing Taliban from inside and being a tribal chief in the area, which Talibans are very active, especially the Haqqani network.
Sure.
That's where they are the one which are more active in our area, in the Loya Paktia, and on both sides of this tribal belt. So knowing them personally, their leadership, their lower commander level people, and based on my information from my tribal sources, Taliban are not an independent entity. They are under influence of a lot of actors, both individuals and a lot of intelligence services in the region.
Sure.
So the major things are that Taliban at the moment, which they are fighting Afghan government, U.S. forces, NATO forces, and active on both sides of the tribal belt. Among them, there's a lot of foreigners, which I'll say based on, and this is, I'm talking about fact, which I know for the facts, and I've seen them physically. Arabs, which are Al Qaeda, Chechens, Uyghurs, which from China, Uzbek from Uzbekistan, Turkish from Turkey, and even some Westerners like from Great Britain, from U.S., from France, from Germany, different parts. So based on my information, I think somewhere between 8 to 10,000 foreigners are among the Taliban fighting at this point when we're talking. So I don't know what will be their future after the agreement or U.S. Withdrawal. And then because these are the core fighters for the Taliban. And these are the ones which are involved in the suicidal attacks and major attacks on the big cities, highways, and different places. So they have a major say among the Taliban. So I don't know how the Taliban going to convince them. And one of the major article among the agreement is the Taliban gonna distance themselves from these individual or groups, which I don't think so. It is physical based on my knowledge and information from the ground. So I don't think so. And based on my information at this point from among the Taliban, what they want is as soon as the U.S. can withdraw, and once the U.S. withdraws, then they can handle the Afghan government and all the other stuff, and then whatever they want with their background. So it is a risky situation at this point.
So if you were put in charge of crafting the solution to bring this conflict to an end, what would that look like? Wait, what do you think is the answer?
What I'm thinking is it's $1 million question.
At least.
At least, yes, sir. I think it's internal and external factors are involved in here. I mean, I think based on my information, based on the efforts by Ambassador Khalilzad and his colleagues all over the U.S. government, I think the international community, the regional community, somehow they are on board to get this peace deal going and get this situation, handled. But internally, coming to the Afghan side and inside Afghanistan, government side, Taliban side, I think there's major issues are still there, which will be not simple to solve very easily or very soon. And the major thing is that what I'm scared is that because the regional involvement, especially from the neighboring countries, it was usually Pakistan before, but now Iran is very much active. And even based on my information from southwest and western Afghanistan, they have been providing some very sophisticated arms to Taliban, even anti-aircraft recently. So this makes the situation more complex and liquid. And then based on whatever is going on between Iran and the United States and the international community, so this will, I think the Iranian will put more fuel on the fire.
Yeah, we got a lot of we have a lot of people, in other words, who don't necessarily want this peace agreement to work.
Oh no, sir, not at all. No, no, no. I'll say what based on my information and my perspective, I think we have like maybe 30% people want this work, 70% doesn't.
Yeah, I personally, I think part of the issue here, back to what we were talking about early on with the Duran line, is
Mm-hmm.
that historically Afghanistan is a place or an area, but historically Afghanistan is not a country as we want to pretend that it is.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Um, and we're trying to not just get rid of foreign fighters, but we're trying to create a country in a place where there hasn't been one in these boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's a difficult thing to do. So I think as we're coming to the conclusion here,
Mm-hmm.
you're sort of pessimistic. You're not particularly optimistic that this peace deal is really going to be the solution that people want it to be.
I don't think so in the long run. Yeah, I mean, it will be good for a while. I mean, people will be happy, but I don't think so it will be implemented on the ground. And I don't think so there's feasibility on the ground to implement this deal going on because I see a lot of hurdles there on the ground, and then both internal and external. And then, as you said, Afghanistan is a tribal country. It's not something that easily you can accomplish things in there. There's a combination of tribalists there, and then there are internal rivalries between the tribes from hundreds of years. So there's multiple issues. I mean, if somebody wants to get involved in Afghan affairs, they better understand all the tribal structure first. I mean, I'm sure the United States did study before entering Afghanistan, and they know, and they have a lot of experienced people. And but moving forward, I think in this kind of situation, it will be very difficult to manage things. I mean, because you have to talk tribe to tribe. It's not one tribe that you're gonna sit with the chief or you're gonna sit with the people. It is like hundreds of tribes there, so you can't just get everybody on your side.
Yeah, well, and back to this issue where we started with sort of the idea of nation states. I mean, Europe did not go through this and reach the concept of nation states in a matter of a few years. It took them centuries
Mm-hmm.
of conflict. So it's not as if people in the West have some magic answer to this. The answer was very protracted and often very bloody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mumtaz, thank you very much for illuminating these very complex issues for us. I appreciate you making time.
It's my pleasure, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much again for your kind request and invitation. It'll be my pleasure and good to know you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time on Ground Truth.